There was a time when humans and apes lived side by side. Impossible as that may seem.
So for me, over the last 25 years, I think probably the most exciting thing has been the advent of performance capture in terms of when we're starting to talk about big budget Hollywood movies. And whenever we talk about performance capture, we're of course talking about the New Zealand-based company Weta. And from the Lord of the Rings films into Avatar into the Planet of the Apes trilogy, what we've seen is Weta and the filmmakers they collaborate with, each film pushes this technology forward. They make a conscious effort to take what they learned from the next one and make huge steps. And so when we think about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, this is after the Caesar trilogy. It's the war's over, humans lost, the apes have taken over the world. And if you think about what director Wes Ball was asking of with Weta here, it's really quite extraordinary. There's always been humans and apes. Humans now take a little bit back seat, and we got 11 new apes characters. And the apes, some of them did sign language. Now they're all walking and talking like it's an Aaron Sorkin film. And they're walking, it's a journey film. They're going through these different New Zealand landscapes, and that means a lighter footprint and all these things that you wouldn't associate with performance capture. So I'm really excited to bring this group up here to talk about this film. First off, it's a great film, it'd be interesting to hear about it, but also I think Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, more so than any other film, points to where we're headed with this technology and what's possible. So really excited, and we're gonna welcome up first up, director Wes Ball. Visual Effects Supervisor Erik Winquist. And actor Kevin Durand. Now, if you haven't seen the Apes movie, Kevin is Proximus Caesar, which in that clip, he's the big scary villain at the end.
He's even scarier in person.
What a wonderful day.
All right, so Wes, they finished the Caesar trilogy. It's a little bit of a blank slate. The studio comes to you and kind of like, what do you want? What would you think about doing with this franchise? I wonder if you could talk a little bit big picture, what you're thinking about in terms of the world building and the type of story that you wanted to tell with this one.
First it was getting over that hurdle of like, we want to do another Planet of the Apes movie. Okay. I love those last three movies, and it was like it was perfectly rounded up, finished, and like what do you do, and like the biggest thing for me is I didn't want to do a part 4. I've said this before, but like there's no legs to that. You kind of have an ending on an ending, right? And so at the same time, we didn't want to abandon the Caesar storyline. That's such a crucial part of this thing. So really, the very beginnings of it was about how we come up with a new trajectory, a new little chapter, both aesthetically, we're going to shoot in a lot more light. The idea of cutting, 300, we don't ever say specifically, but around 300 years into the future, following these new characters, a coming of age story. It's more of a younger group of apes this time. And underneath all that, built on the foundation of what Caesar left behind, right? The kind of myth and the legend, all that kind of stuff. And then we kind of really saw ourselves as trying to straddle 2 universes, and that was the Caesar storyline that came before us and the 1968 original Charlton Heston movie. And so we tried to put a little DNA of all the movies into our movies so that we came up with something that felt new, but still familiar, you know what I mean? And so we got to play around with these great themes about, what anyone who's seen the movie, this coming of age story of a young, innocent, naive character setting out into a big, dangerous world and uncovering these lost truths about the world that was left behind, and how legacy is twisted and manipulated and kind of can steer a character, and thinking about how this Noa character, we've got plans to where he could ultimately go in this long story. If we're lucky enough, we'll get a trilogy going here again, and tell and keep up the kind of tradition of great, spectacle-oriented entertainment, but centered around really intimate, profound kind of human questions, So that was the goal.
Erik, I just want to give a little history here because I've heard you talk about this before. In 2009, there's the Avatar film, and a lot of work and a lot of advancement and performance capture went into that film, which then got carried over to the Apes trilogy, and the challenge there is how to do what we did in the studio and bring it out into the exteriors and the light. And you could see that work advance in that trilogy. Now you have the new Avatar film, a lot more innovations, a lot of work that went into that. I wonder if you could talk about what you guys took from that to bring over to this film, because I think a lot of the things that Wes wanted to do weren't possible without that. Could you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, coming off the back of Way of Water, the acquisition side of things, obviously Jim and his team at Lightstorm, they had taken lessons from what they had learned on the original capture sessions. What could we do differently on the hardware side of things? Back in 2006 through 2007 or so, when they were capturing the first one, it was all about a single camera that was witnessing the actors' performances. Fast forward 10 years, we're now using a pair of cameras, and what that actual depth gives us, the actual extra perspective gives us, is depth. And from that depth, we can get a lot more precise read, 48 frames a second of what this guy's face is doing. And what that really, really enables is just a greater fidelity of all the little ticks and nuances and stuff that go on, especially around the mouth, which is such a huge part of, in these films, the muzzle of the ape is just so flexible.
They're talking a lot.
Yeah, and exactly. We've got 12 brand new characters we had to do for this one, and all of them are speaking roles. And so the requirements of all of that stuff, it was such a huge focus for us on these films, is to make sure that all the performance that we're getting from our actors was coming across even greater fidelity than we had in the previous films.
And there's also an element, right, of another aspect of a two-camera thing is also the information of the landscape, right?
Yeah, so there was the actors' cameras, so there was actually seeing their face, but then we also had an extra pair of machine vision cameras that we actually strapped to the motion picture rigs, whether it was Steadicam or a crane, whatever it was. And that extra perspective, because now we could regenerate a 3D version of the world at limited resolution, but it gave us a view into what was going on in front of the camera in a way we've never had before, and that allowed us to go into environments that were more remote, that didn't have the infrastructure to allow us to set up a full-blown mocap volume outside like we had in some of our locations, but enabling it to take that technology and bring it out into even more remote locations with a smaller footprint, less crew, and just get things done more efficiently.
Like a real sense of spontaneity, right? If you look at this movie, it's a little different than the last movies. It's not as still. We do at times, but I tend to like stuff where we go out and you feel like you're making it up on the spot. I can't do that with this kind of a movie. There's so much technology and process associated with it all. So we kept talking about it a lot. It's like handheld, go into these locations and just kind of get inspired, and suddenly you want to put a shot here instead of there, but we didn't put the infrared cameras over here, that kind of thing. So to come up with a system that was flexible, it allowed us to kind of feel like the movie was kind of like very raw and sort of gritty and not super polished. It was a challenge, but it was a worthy one.
And quicker thing. You can go into a location and grab a shot or two. It's not, right? You can have
it's not a big thing that we had to plan for weeks and set up 2 days prior to get in there and all that kind of thing. It allowed us to be a lot more fleet-footed in the shooting process.
All right, Kevin, I want to bring you into this conversation and talking about acting for performance capture. But before we do that, I want to just take a quick look so we can maybe get everybody on the same page about what this looks like.
With Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes had this particular vision, and the only place that could create that was Weta. Virtual filmmaking and motion capture, they bring digital pixels to life based on the actor's soul. The actor's performances combined with Weta's visual effects really bring something new to the table.
Sorry about stealing your soul.
So Kevin, I think this is your first performance capture movie, right, as an actor?
Yeah, that was my
It was
first
all
time.
the actors'
Yeah.
first performance
Yeah.
captures. Wow.
Yeah.
So what was it like? What was different? What was it like learning this process?
I thought it would have been a lot more different than it actually turned out to be. I mean, the actual truth of the characters, just like as if you were not working in this realm, is the same thing. It's just we initially thought, oh my gosh, this helmet with the camera and these lycra suits with all these bulbs. This is going to be a real problem, you know, like you think this is so different. And then within like 5 minutes, you know, you're just connecting with your fellow actors in these environments that I didn't think we were going to have these type of environments.
I shot the movie out in the wild and with real sets.
Unreal. Like I really thought it was going to be all volume, and so it didn't change much for me. You know, and they afforded us this incredible opportunity to you know, study the anatomical, physiological differences between, you know, me specifically, a bonobo, and I think I'm human. Might be Sasquatch, but yeah, and then try to figure out how to make my anatomy move the way that a bonobo would, and then realizing that once I figured that out, I was like, yeah, but Proximus doesn't really want to be a bonobo fully. He wants to be a little more human. So
he's a fan of man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he. Yeah, it was really, really fulfilling. The most fulfilling experience I've had yet.
Wes, tell us about Ape Camp.
Yeah, Ape Camp is a really important thing. For like 8 weeks or so, we put all the guys through this training with one of our little our Cirque du Soleil expert, essentially, that really helps these guys figure out how to be and inhabit these apes. You can't play an ape. There's something Andy Serkis told us very early on. You can't just go in and pretend to be one. You have to really, it sounds strange, but internalize this ape thing so that it becomes like second nature to them. So that when they're on set and we're rolling, you know, all the cameras and we have, you know, spending $100,000 a day, you know, you can't be figuring this stuff out. Like they have to, it has to be just like a switch. They just turn on and they just become this ape, so they can just be there in the scene and being inspired by the moment that we kind of, you know, create together. And so this Ape Camp was crucially important for all of them to kind of find their inner ape, as cheesy as that sounds. What's really interesting about it is that when we got into the mocap side of things, that sometimes Erik would show me some of the capture stuff that's just the skeleton of the apes, right? So I don't see the models of the ape figures, or I don't see the actors themselves, but I could just see these little stick figures walking around in this kind of capture volume. I could pick out which actor was which, right? Because the way they walked, the way they held themselves, the way they kind of, their personality comes through. Like what Kevin was saying, like he kind of stood a little more proud, a little more human-like. You know, even in Noa, as his character of the arc of the story, in the very beginning, he's very much like this. He's a little bit more ape. And by the end of it, you see him, he's standing up much more like this. There's an arc even in his body performance of his character as we go through the movie. You know, all this stuff, it was fascinating to kind of work with. And what's really cool, and it's hard to appreciate when you watch these movies, like nothing's for free. Like all this stuff are choices that you're seeing up there. It's some artist choosing to push his lips out 3 millimeters out versus 2, or have the little eye twitch here instead of there. And then, you know, the choices from the actors and the choices from the team at Weta coming together to make something that should be impossible. A fully synthetic image sometimes, you know, if not the actual character that we're kind of, you know, empathizing with. And we buy it, and you take it for granted, and you just kind of get swept up in it, and you forget this is all manufactured by an incredibly, you know, huge amount of talented artists, filmmakers, storytellers.
We're going to talk about that, and I want to show a little piece of Proximus Caesar, but before we do that, Wes, how is casting different? Is it different?
Yeah, so interesting. The casting, the only thing that I had to factor in casting is finding actors who were willing to do this crazy thing. And that's different. Some actors, like there's one actor, I won't say his name, but like he's an actor that needs the costume, that needs that going through the makeup and going through that mental transformation before he goes and rolls the cameras, and it wasn't going to work. But, you know, we really focused early on to find actors that were willing to go into this strange process to kind of forget all that stuff and go back into their heads when they're just a kid pretending, and it becomes real for them. And like you said, it was a little bit of an adjustment. You know, it happens. You know, at first we're like, oh, this is fucking weird. They're walking around in these pajama suits and they're, you know, you sometimes like, okay, what am I doing again? This is strange. But eventually you kind of get totally past that and you just get back to the truth. The same thing of any other movie where it's just you guys relate to each other, you connect with each other, and you try to make an honest, truthful performance. So that's really all it is for casting, is to do the same thing. And what's great about this is it's freeing. I can cast anyone to do anything. You know, like Ika, our guy who plays Silva, this giant gorilla. He's a skinny, athletic dude. he can now play this other guy, Kevin. He actually was a big giant scary, so it worked really well. But I could cast any race, I could cast any gender to be anything we want. So in a weird way, it's kind of freeing. I got to pick just who I thought personality-wise would fit the character we had in our minds.
Okay.
I think we all knew from actors' perspective, we knew that we were in good hands with Wes and with Erik, and I just want to say, what a common denominator is amongst a lot of the people that you did cast. We all come from the theater, so you're used to having that kind of fourth
the
wall.
kind of gray box sort of
It's
user
like it doesn't
imagination.
matter that I'm wearing skin tight pajamas and this helmet. None of
That's
that
right.
matters.
Owen, you're right. He did that.
Yeah.
I want to take a look and I'm not sure everybody's seen this film. I want a little clip of Meet Your Character, Proximus Caesar.
Awesome.
If you guys wouldn't mind running that.
Oh yeah.
In the kingdom of the planet of the apes, Proximus Caesar is ruthless and dangerous.
It's a wonderful day. A wonderful day.
His following is forced under his rule.
We work together as one.
In his eyes, humans are a plague on this earth.
This is our time.
His goal is complete domination.
Oh!
And he just may achieve it.
Now bend for your king.
What was key for you finding him in the voice and the movement? Maybe just a character.
Well, initially we got the audition, and I was like, I'm not even. We were just talking about it. I'm not even going to try to figure out the physicality or anything. That I was just find the truth of the scene and like maybe the energy,
The enjoyment.
The enjoyment.
To me, Proximus enjoys being Proximus.
That's exactly it. Yeah, and then when when Wes tapped me on the shoulder and said, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the greatest thing. And like I said, we had 5 weeks. I had 5 weeks working with Alain Gauthier, who's one of the founders of Cirque du Soleil, and it was just, I showed up to the party a little late, so like it was just him and I in the monkey gym, in the ape gym.
It literally is that. It's a basement that we set up just for the actors to go in every day,
Yeah.
and they put on this thing, and it was the creepiest thing to go down there. Because when you go into their ape world, I walk in, and then the actors they just stay in character the whole time, and so they walk up to you and start sniffing you and touching you.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm getting out of here. So it was like
start picking things out of his hair.
Exactly.
Yeah, because everybody, there wasn't one actor on this that
Fully
didn't buy in. So,
It's kind of all I asked, basically. It was like, just you got to go for it. You got to really forget all this goofy stuff and just go for it and commit, and it'll work for them.
Yeah.
So, Wes, one thing that you've talked about, and Matt Reeves talked about it quite a bit as well, there's an element here, and it's amazing. You can watch, the DVD, by the way, is amazing. You can watch them back to back. You can see the raw and the finished film. And there's something here that's amazing. The soul of the actor comes through. But there's another element of it, which is it's not just technical. The way that the human face expresses itself is different, what you might do with your nose, or your lips, or your eyes.
Apes don't really have brows, for instance.
It's not a one-to-one. And so there's an element of translating the performance, which I know is something that blew Matt away and blew you away too, in terms of it's not purely turning it into an ape. There's an element of artistry of translating it too.
I think I want to get across more than anything. There is no button on the computer that says make ape. You know what I mean? Like we have all this technology to capture these intricate little details, but ultimately Erik and his team at Weta have to go through and then interpret that. And real artists have to go through and make choices to translate what I'm feeling from this actor onto this digital puppet creature. And I think you should talk more about that, but I want to make sure that's really clear that the ridiculous amount of subtlety and artistry does not come for free.
So who are these people, Erik? Who are these people that are doing
These are the facial animators of Weta Effects, who are
Best in the world.
among the best in the world at what they do. So on we talked about the acquisition side of the technology. One of the advancements on the back end of it all was a deep learning sort of powered facial solver that essentially took all the moving dots on the faces and interpreted what that meant, what muscles to move on the ape faces to essentially match the performance the actors were doing. But it's never about a one-to-one mapping, because if Kevin here raised his upper lip, to a certain amount, if we did that on Proximus, it might be hilarious, or it might be terrifying, or it might not convey what Kevin's face was conveying in that particular moment. And that's the solver, the new technology here, basically gave the animators like a good foundation that was consistent, across the entire movie, depending on independent of who the animator was, that then allowed them to focus all of their energy and all their talent on looking at their ape and looking at what the actor was doing and going, what am I reading? What's the read, that emotional, what's hitting me right now from that actor's performance, and am I getting that from the ape yet or not? And if the answer is no, then we're not done yet, and we need to go figure out I see, if maybe we just tweak a little bit of what the muzzle's doing and maybe just a little bit more on the brow, and suddenly, like Wes is saying, the smallest little change can suddenly completely flip your read of a performance.
There's an example, there's several shots that I remember us working on, something's just not working, something is it's off. And what it was simply taking his chin and turning it down 5 degrees. And suddenly it just locks in, there it is, there's that guy. Same thing with the likeness of the actors inside these apes. I told the story before, but I don't think Owen will mind me saying this, but we were working on the model design of Noa as his character, and we for months now we had been working on this thing, and it's almost there, but there's something missing, there's something not alive about it. And it was as soon as Erik and the team figured out that if we took Owen's face and we kind of mirrored it back and forth, you see his face, like most people's, is not symmetrical, and so his right eye, I think it's his right eye, it's a left eye. It's like 5 millimeters lower than his other one. And as soon as Erik and team put that into Noa, boom, it suddenly became real. You know what I mean? It's just little, tiny, subtle, imperceptible things that just all add up in this kind of effort to make something that feels, real. It's really amazing. I was shocked by how much work actually goes into making this stuff.
Is it trippy as an actor to see, again, the soul of you and the soul of your performance is there, but then to see another artist translating that's got to be trippy.
Look, when we finished shooting, I remember, Erik, you had these conversations with each of us, these individual conversations, and he wasn't just asking about the performance, he was asking about what we were thinking during the performance. He was asking all these really specific things that were internalized so that he could understand how to translate those things. And there's just so much work, so much care, so much love there. Honestly, for me, I was just saying this outside to Wes. The first time I did ADR, Wes was like, "Oh, just play him the scene, and I'll be back." And it was the first time I saw Proximus. And I kid you not, I turned into a crying baby. I was everything that I had dreamt that it could be was there, and even more. They just really, Erik and everybody at Weta just absolutely brought it so much further than I ever could have imagined.
And sometimes, Erik, it's easier than others. We were talking before, I think it's the dinner table scene with his character, where it's you guys don't settle, and sometimes you got to go back. And I wonder if you could talk about that scene as it relates to Proximus here.
Well, so that scene in particular, I think part of it was just the storytelling and all the editorial side of things, looking at it going, this little moment doesn't quite tell every bit of the story that it could yet. So I think there was a push at some point, we're going to do some pickups. And so Kevin and Owen came back down to New Zealand, and we worked that scene at the window twice, right? Yeah. Either way, quite late in the game, I'd reworked part of that scene, and it makes such a huge difference. But that's one of my favorite performance moments in the movie. Because it's
3 weeks before the movie came out or something,
it's such a...
We literally, this is crazy about it. We have this crazy idea. We're going to add this little extra line. It's a minute. I'm sorry, guys. We got to do it. But we got to deliver this thing. And it's we have to fly down to New Zealand with Kevin and Owen, for a day to shoot this thing because it's easier because Weta's there to mocap this thing and then fly back home and finish the movie. I mean, it's like that kind of level of stuff, but we can only do that because the movie was so far along by that point. We can actually see, we can improve things by doing this, or that kind of thing.
But the performance that takes place in that little moment there, it really highlights what is possible with performance capture. I mean, this isn't big about, your character's all about big bombast at the right times, but also has this like simmering, like whispering, menace, growl kind of aspect to his character, and all of that stuff just comes through so beautifully in that moment. It's great.
If you haven't seen it, by the way, and I love Disney for doing this, and I don't know if you two were supportive of it or not, but the Blu-rays you can watch the whole entire movie.
Yeah, I think it's either the HD DVD or whatever it is, but that was a big push on us to I thought people needed to see what the movie starts as when we shoot it and what the final result is. So in one frame, you can watch the entire movie, played through with basically a top and bottom version of the movie, whereas you got the final picture and then the raw dailies of what we actually shot. And you can really see, you're watching this movie, how much work went into this. That forest isn't really there. That whole thing of water is not really there. It's really, really amazing for people that kind of care about, filmmaking and technical stuff and visual effects stuff. It really is a glimpse that we've never had before into what is kind of possible.
But also beautifully illustrates how much of the performance moment is these guys. It's not just made up by animators. It really is this beautiful hybrid performance.
And that's what when I was watching it again last night, Wes. The thing that I was thinking about is that lower frame of the actors in the suits.
Yeah, the raw. Yeah.
That's your cut. Right? That's
what we're basically making our choices on. Yeah. And that's difficult because you have to imagine what's going on here is when we start cutting this thing, I'm not seeing apes. I'm seeing an actor in a funny suit. I'm seeing this crazy movie that's about immersing yourself into a fantastical world, and we don't have any of that to see. It is a huge leap of faith. And what's interesting about it is that you'll make these choices, you'll turn over these shots. I think this is the performance, and 6 months later, or whatever it is, I'll finally see the ape come back. And so if everything goes right, which most times it does, we're good, we move on. But sometimes I didn't make the right choice because I didn't know what was going on. So I was like, Erik, I'm sorry, we gotta change this or do that, and we kind of figure it out. Even down to the things where it's sometimes you realize that you cut differently when you're seeing an actor because you can engage with a human being so much quicker versus an ape. It's too fast. You need to have a chance to look at it and see it. And so, sometimes we had to kind of add frames here and there. And that was always it was just a constant kind of moving target as this little jigsaw puzzle that was all kind of in pieces. Towards the very end, it all kind of comes together and you hope it all fits,
We only have a few minutes left. And, we keep talking about performance capture, but in terms of the visual effects, there's a whole world building thing outside of this. Wes, let's start with how did you envision this world? What was that? And then, Erik, I want to talk about how you took these New Zealand locations and turned them into
Australian locations, but
Australia.
Okay, yeah. So there's, like I said, I felt like we were straddling the world between the world we left behind, of the Caesar trilogy and this 1968 Charlton Heston movie, where in that movie, time and the landscape and erosion had basically wiped away all signs of humanity, right? That was very much part of the movie, except for the underground, subway tunnels or whatever it is. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of really showcase that idea of the world, how not only is the overgrowth kind of covering everything, but weather is eroding these things. Whole buildings are collapsing into piles of rubble that almost look like mountains, to the point where it's you kind of can't see what we left behind anymore. It becomes these ancient kind of ruins that you find in the jungle from some lost civilization. So that was kind of the gist of it. See enough here and there where it's oh yeah, this was once a different world, and then it was just figuring out how to achieve it, versus whether it's full CG chunk here, or we just do a little matte painting back there, or it's just the usual kind of bag of tricks, I guess.
Yeah, I mean every place that we were, or any specific story point, if there was an opportunity to actually shoot a live action plate for that, if there was a location there's an opening shot at the beginning of the movie where the camera's looking at an eagle flying across the river and the camera tips up and you see all the skyscrapers. That was very much let's location scouts, let's find a place in Australia that we can use as the foundation for all of this, because if nothing else, we replaced something like 90% of that shot with CG. We always had the real thing there that we could refer back to, going, something's not right yet. What is it? Oh, the atmosphere's not right, or the focus isn't right, or the light's not the right direction, or whatever. All that kind of stuff was part of the plan for all of this, was to try and anchor everything we're doing here as often as we can in real photography, because this is a live action movie. But the thing that also then gave us was great touchstones for the climb sequence, which is pretty much entirely CG after that. Yeah.
All the little leaves blowing in the wind, all the little bugs flying in the air, the nest and the moss that you see on the nest, it's all CG. It's all fake.
And it is because there was no practical way to do that. There was
and
no
it would have never
way,
looked as good.
Yeah, there was never going to be a way to build a set that was going to be as rich as what we wound up with, in a sort of budgetary, responsible way. But also the aspects of trying to do the capture of a lot of that sequence is beyond even what a stunt performer on wires might be able to do in cases. And so there's so many reasons why that one became CG,
Yeah. We got to end it there. Really, thank you guys for coming and talk about this.
Thank you guys.